Good evening. We begin tonight with what President Bush calls a difficult and dangerous mission to save lives in Somalia. Speaking from the Oval Office today, Mr. Bush said that only the United States has the global reach to do the kind of job required to deliver tons of food and make sure no one gets in the way. The first troops already offshore will descend on Somalia next week. Governor Clinton says he supports the president's decision, and he commended Mr. Bush for his leadership. We'll have reports from Somalia tonight, from the Pentagon, and from Camp Pendleton, where some of those troops are based. But we're going to begin at the political center. ABC's John McWethy is at the White House.
The president said he is sending troops to Somalia because America is the only country equipped to avert a human disaster there.
The people of Somalia, especially the children of Somalia, need our help.
The president said the mission will be strictly humanitarian, not to impose a political solution, but simply to deliver food. More than a dozen other countries also will send troops, and the president warned that any warlords or bandits who try to interfere will be dealt with harshly.
The outlaw elements in Somalia must understand this is serious business. We will accomplish our mission.
And he promised U.S. troops will not get bogged down.
This operation is not open-ended. We will not stay one day longer than is absolutely necessary.
These assurances were directed in part to Congress, which until today the president had not officially consulted. But after a briefing in the cabinet room, most senior Republicans and Democrats said they were on board.
I'm one Democrat who thinks that the president's doing the only thing he can do and should do.
I think the impression we had today strongly from the military leadership is that they do not expect major confrontations with armed forces.
But not everyone at the meeting was so sure.
I remain deeply concerned. The commitment is a broad commitment. It is an open commitment. It is not tightly defined.
This could be the president's last major foreign policy initiative, and according to a senior aide, it is exactly the kind of maneuver that George Bush wants to go out on, taking some risks to fight for a cause that no one can argue with. John McWethy, ABC News, the White House.
The Somali capital, Mogadishu, with which we'll all become more familiar in the coming weeks, is a fairly unpredictable place. 500 Pakistani peacekeepers working for the UN have been there for 2 months. Today they got into a firefight with one of the many armed gangs that careen through the city. The machine gunner in the back of a truck was killed, but the airport, which the Pakistanis are there to protect, was closed for much of the morning. ABC's Jim Laurie is in Mogadishu.
Somewhere off this coast, the troops are preparing to come ashore. While there may have been some doubts at first, many Somalis and most international aid workers here welcome the U.S.-led operation and are anxious for it to get underway.
At this moment in time, it's the only thing to do. Everything has been tried to, in order to try and accelerate the delivery of humanitarian assistance to make it more effective. But everything so far has failed.
I hope that they're going to come ashore in sufficient numbers and sufficient strength of equipment to be able to sort of swamp the area.
Mogadishu port is one of 2 U.S. troops planned to open. 12,000 tons of food just sits. It's been here for more than a month, but no one has the power to distribute it. The last time it was tried, 2 weeks ago, half a 34-truck convoy was looted. The prevailing view here is that U.S. troops will encounter little or no resistance, certainly not at the port of Mogadishu. Some expect, when confronted with real force, the young, untrained gunmen who roam the streets will simply disappear. There is some uncertainty here among aid workers about just what the goals of the U.S. mission will be. Rotary Wynn Pope of CARE hopes U.S. forces will carry out a broader program of aid distribution.
I really had hoped that they were going to come ashore with all their equipment and take on a major humanitarian relief operation as well, because there are vast tracts of the country which we can't really get to.
The one hope shared by all is that this operation will remove the obstacles that have hampered the aid effort from the start. While many have died, there are still 500,000 lives to be saved. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Mogadishu.
After President Bush made the announcements today that everyone knew was coming, the Pentagon tried to answer all the specific mission questions that reporters have. How long will it take for U.S. forces to set up base in Somalia? How much Somali territory will they need to control? How long will they stay? ABC's Bob Zelnick is at the Pentagon.
If the Pentagon sticks to plans laid down today, relief could begin flowing to some of Somalia's neediest people within 10 days. Early next week, Marines now aboard the carrier Tripoli will move ashore, clearing Mogadishu's port and its main roads of armed gangs. The Marines will also secure the airfields at Mogadishu and Baidoa in central Somalia, permitting transport planes from Camp Pendleton and Fort Drum carrying the main U.S. combat units to arrive. U.S. forces then plan to secure central and southern population centers, gaining control of the so-called Triangle of Death, where the problems of starvation have been the worst. Today at the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Cheney and General Colin Powell, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, made it clear that once the physical environment is secure, military responsibilities will be handed over to UN peacekeepers.
It's sort of like the cavalry coming to the rescue, straightening things out for a while, and then letting the marshals come back in to keep things under control.
The U.S. hopes to work cooperatively with Somalia's private armies, possibly even paying bounty for their most dangerous weapons. But Powell and Cheney said that if threatened, U.S. forces will shoot first.
We're just not going to ride shotgun, waiting for people to shoot at us and then shoot back.
The two said this mission could take at least 2 to 3 months, pushing it far beyond the January 20th inauguration target date pressed by the White House.
And we don't want to be bound by an artificial deadline that is unrelated to circumstances that our troops face on the ground in Somalia.
Even after the UN takes over, Powell and Cheney say Marines will remain offshore, just in case the marshals have to summon the cavalry again. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
The nearly 30,000 American troops who are being sent to Somalia are being taken primarily from 2 military units. The Army's 10th Mountain Division, a light infantry unit based at Fort Drum here in New York State, and the 1st Marine Expeditionary Battalion based at Camp Pendleton in California. Those Marines were among the first in Saudi Arabia during the run-up to the Persian Gulf War. ABC's Brian Rooney is at Camp Pendleton today.
This is the 1st Landing Support Battalion. These are the troops who will unload the ships carrying equipment and supplies for the Marines who follow. They've been packing up their equipment, getting their briefings, and their shots. Marines like to say they're trained to do a job, and this is just another one. Every job is different, though, and many are dangerous.
I always worry because there's a lot of different things that can happen that we don't have any control over right now.
Some of these Marines are veterans of the Gulf War, and they like the idea of going this time not to fight, but to help people who are starving.
Personally, I like to help people, and this gives me a chance to get out and help the people that need it the most.
It takes helping people out, keeping people from dying every day by the hundreds. Sure, I feel good about it.
The battalion was also issued weapons. Although their job is to sling supplies, they do have to be prepared for trouble. Most of the troops leaving here the next few days are logistical units. Not until next week will there be departures of major combat groups. Brian Rooney, ABC News, Camp Pendleton, California.